Dr. Jeffress, kind of where to begin, but I heard you relate a story that intrigued me, and I'm picking up on that here by way of opening, because you related a story that President Kennedy, this is before he was elected, I believe he might have been nominated, but he asked Billy Graham why no one is talking about the Lord's return, and it's no surprise that is still the case, that our pulpits are pretty silent. It seems to be all about now, be all you can be now, how to now. Is this one of the reasons you wrote this book?
It's exactly the reason, Jan, that I wrote the book. Billy Graham, who, by the way, was a member of our church here at First Baptist Dallas for more than 50 years before he became ill and joined a little church closer to him. But Billy Graham said that the second coming of Jesus Christ is the most neglected teaching in the church today. And I believe that's true. I mean, just look at what you're hearing in churches. It's all about how to be a better husband or wife, how to have a more successful career. It's all about the here and now, and very little to do with the hereafter. And yet, you know better than anyone, Jan, about the volume of material in the Bible about what awaits us in eternity. You know, the book of Revelation is the only book of the Bible that has a special blessing for those who read and understand the book. And yet, you know, most Christians, I mean, they grab for the Tylenol when they read through the Bible plan, lands them in Daniel or the book of Revelation. I mean, they think Bible prophecy is a mystery. You have to have a PhD from the seminary to understand it. And I wrote Perfect Ending, really to, first of all, simplify the often confusing subject of the end times, but also show why what is going to happen in the future really does matter in how we live today. And that's my purpose in this book.
Yeah, and I want to zero in, and Eric will too, we want to zero in on some specific questions out of the book. Let me just take another little side trail here, because I also heard you say, I think this would be of great interest to our listeners. You feel that in your lifetime that tax-exempt status within churches will probably go, that they will be accused of participating in hate speech, and perhaps you said maybe not your lifetime, but your successor's lifetime, you certainly expect that to happen. Is that correct?
It is, and I think it may happen more quickly than any of us believe. Let's just look at this scenario. I mean, I believe we're just one Supreme Court decision away from the Supreme Court declaring all state bans against gay marriage as unconstitutional. Gay marriage will be the official position of the federal government. I think that's unquestioned. Well, if that's true, then what is going to happen to churches or to radio programs or to Christian radio stations that have a policy that is now considered to be discriminatory? I believe that the federal government will say the government should not subsidize any kind of hate speech or discriminatory speech. And it's interesting, Jan, that they believe that tax-exempt status is somehow subsidizing religious organizations. I don't think it's a leap at all to say that's probably the first thing that's going to fall, as there's a continued assault upon Christianity in our country.
One thing I heard you say is that, and this would apply not only to your book, but to the entire subject of eschatology, end times, that we need to live in light of the fact that time is short. It doesn't matter what our eschatological view is. You and I are going to talk about a particular eschatological view, but that is very, very secondary to the fact that it's going to end for everyone one way or another, and probably fairly soon.
Absolutely. And, you know, you mentioned earlier that I do a lot of secular programs, which I do. You know, I have sometimes a secular host, when talking about Bible prophecy, will say in a condescending way, well, do you expect all of this to happen in your time? Do you think the Lord's coming back in your lifetime? And I say, you know, it really is irrelevant. And they kind of say, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm 58 years old. And so I know in the next 30 years, either he's coming or I'm going. But pretty soon I'm going to meet God, and I better be ready for that confrontation. And that's what I say to everybody. The end is near, Jan, for all of us. Whether or not the Lord comes back in our lifetime, we know we have a limited amount of time before we meet God, and that's why we better be ready.
Let me ask you this, because you've led me into this way of thinking right now, and that is the fact that you're dealing with so many secular media people, and some of them are fairly prominent, from O'Reilly to Bill Maher to Alan Combs. You've got some over at CNN, you've got a lot at Fox. Do any of them them ask you, serious questions about eternity? Do any of them take you aside? Do they ask for prayer? Do they ask you to pray for their personal life?
I've developed a good relationship with several of these folks in the secular media, and obviously I wouldn't discuss the names or who they are, but I find that some of them that I talk to are really searching, and I also find that others are probably much more conservative and much more biblically inclined, sometimes are forced into the role of devil's advocate.
Sure.
If anybody tried to guess who I'm talking about, they wouldn't know. So I'm just going to say that, it is very interesting. I will mention one by name, Alan Combs at Fox News. He's kind of the resident liberal at Fox News. He has become a very good friend of mine, and he's very, very honest. Even though we don't agree on a lot of things, he always allows me to share the gospel every time I'm on his program, and I'm really grateful that, he's willing to allow a point of view that doesn't always agree with his own.